thank you so much. And thank you all so much for being here. This is such a wonderful opportunity to talk about food allergies and some upcoming events we have with our Teal Pumpkin Project. So as Tiffany mentioned, my name is Brett Fox. I'm in the Northern Virginia area. And this is a picture of my son. This is actually the day we found out that he had food allergies. You can see the red spots, the red hives all over his stomach. He was a Halloween baby. He was 11 months at this point. And like all Halloween fans, we had caramel apples that were covered with peanuts. I ate one of those, and then I touched my child and left a handprint of hives. And then I thought to myself, wow, maybe he has that thing called peanut allergies. I knew nothing about it at the time. And so that was my quick introduction to the world of food allergies. I joined and then took over the leadership of the Northern Virginia Food Allergy Support Group. And I'm very excited to be involved with FARE as well.
Thanks, Brett. And I'm Kelly Cleary. As Tiffany said, I work for FARE. I'm the Senior Director of Education and Support Programs. And these are my kiddos. Today, I know that Brett and I are going to share some personal experiences to really try to figure out how to navigate holidays, starting with the Halloween and looking at the Teal Pumpkin Project. So the Teal Pumpkin Project has certainly been something that my crew has done for many years. So you can see them on the left there, painting away our big giant pumpkin. We are also big fans of Halloween, as you could see. And I'm a pediatrician and a mom of these four, one of who is this captured creature in the middle, is anaphylactic to multiple foods. So, as we go through this webinar today, I think Brett and I will share some of the lessons that we learned, look at some of the evidence that's out there on how to navigate some of these difficult relationships. But also give you some tips and tricks, especially for Halloween, to try to make it as inclusive as we possibly can for all of the kids who are coming to our door and knocking on our door. So I will hand it over to Brett, who will give us a little bit of background on the Teal Pumpkin Project.
Great. So the Teal Pumpkin Project was started by a fellow food allergy mom, which I think is just so cool and even makes it even more special. It started back in 2012 when this mom from Tennessee, Becky Basilon, I think is how you pronounce her last name, thought of a way to make Halloween and trick-or-treating more inclusive for kids with food allergies. So the Teal Pumpkin Project was adopted by FARE in 2014, and that's when it really took off and became synonymous with Halloween. I know so many families that know about the Teal Pumpkin Project that really don't know much more about food allergies, but just know that they want to be involved during Halloween to offer safe items for everybody. One of the cool things that FARE did when they came along and adopted this and really made this a new campaign was the Teal Pumpkin Project map. And so at this link, which we'll share also maybe in the chat so you can click it, is a way to add your house to the map to let Halloween trick-or-treaters from all over the country know that you are a safe and inclusive house and that you'll have non-food options in addition to whatever other candy items that you'll have. So this is actually super cool. This year, FARE has partnered with CVS, and CVS now, if you go to one of their stores or even look online, you'll see Teal Pumpkin items that are an alternative to the candy in the Halloween aisle. So that's an awesome partnership because everybody can stop at a CVS or shop online. And so these are just a couple in this picture, a couple of the things that you can offer instead of food. This was from our teen advisory group at the summit this past weekend. This is the rating of their favorite items they like to get instead of candy: games, toys, pencils, pens, erasers. We love to give out bubbles because bubbles are so fun for all ages. But the opportunities are endless. Any kind of knick-knack, little game, toy, anything that's a non-food related item would count as a Teal Pumpkin safe item.
And Brett, I will add to this. So this was really some of the fun from the weekend at Summit. We had our first Fair Feud, which was a version of Family Feud. So we had our teens up against some experts in the field. So some, really well-known allergists and dietitians. And one of the questions was, what's your favorite thing to get out of the teal pumpkin, bucket? And this was there. I will tell you which one of these is not my favorite, and that is slime after getting it all over my rugs.
Slime, glitter, same idea.
Yep.
So Halloween parties, teal pumpkin style. So as with all food allergy inclusive parties, focus on the fun, not the food. My generation, a party meant having food. And I think that now in this up and coming generation, it's becoming more commonplace to not see cupcakes and cake and other junk food at every celebration. So that's what we encourage for the Teal Pumpkin Project. Focus on the fun, not the food. Craft stations, painting your pumpkin teal. We're having a teal pumpkin party in Northern Virginia, and we're setting up different stations. One of them is a teal manicure station where we'll have some teenagers. Yes, exactly. Some teenagers doing teal nail polish. We'll of course be decorating teal pumpkins, but just a little bit of creativity makes everybody included in the party. That's not just about food. And that food, I feel like I've seen, at least over the years, even when there's not a food allergy child in the classroom, these kids don't need extra cupcakes. They don't need extra junk food. So I think it's embraced by the whole community, not just food allergy parents and the medical community. So I hope that we can make sure that this continues. Food versus fun. I'm sorry, fun versus food.
I love that idea of the nail polish. Hadn't thought of that. And I'm actually doing a teal pumpkin project for my daughter's Girl Scout group. So that would perhaps be a good one. But Teal Pumpkin Party was one of the first introductions that I actually had to the food allergy community. Someone that lived nearby had heard that my son had recently anaphylaxed, and she reached out to me to say, hey, I'm having this party at my home. And my son was so young at that time that I was afraid to really navigate the situation out of our home. And when I went there, it was probably the best reintroduction after, having this happen, because it was really a party about, magicians and painting and having fun. So the Teal Pumpkin Project certainly has a special place in my heart.
That's awesome. And bringing the teal pumpkin to your community. So in addition to putting your house on the map on FAIR's website, just displaying a teal pumpkin on your front porch, in your doorway, shows children that they'll have a non-food item. And also these signs are free printable signs you can get from the FAIR website. There's a whole bunch of them. But these are just a really fun thing. And I'll tell you, when my son walks up to a house that has a teal pumpkin or offers something besides food, I mean, he's 17 now, but when he was younger, it was just the best feeling as a mom to know that this person just took a little bit of extra time and energy, and not even, because now it's all in the Halloween aisle, but it's just such a heartwarming thing to include everybody. And it's just so easy to do. I think it's easier to include everybody than not to these days. So, so these are just some ways you can show the community that you're taking part in the Teal Pumpkin Project.
And I think that these free downloadable signs are really easy to, have your kids put them in people's mailboxes. I think just letting the people in your neighborhood know that all they need to do is put a teal pumpkin or a poster outside of their door and have, a separate place that they have placed non-food items for kids to come. And I agree with you, Brett, that, my son still to this day, he is 12, and when he sees someone that has a teal pumpkin, it is not about getting the stickers or the slime or the bubbles. He will say to me somewhere on the trail, wow, they must know someone with food allergies. And the Teal Pumpkin Project is great for not just kids with food allergies, but kids with food intolerances, medically restricted diets. We had a friend who her daughter had type 1 diabetes, and she came to our door and said, "Can I see your teal pumpkin?" And my son was like, "You have food allergies too?" And she said, "No, I have type 1 diabetes." And he said to her, "Well, I guess that's your special thing. Okay, here you go. Pick this out." So I think that we're teaching empathy, in a very non-traditional way, teaching kids that the holiday doesn't look the same for everyone who's knocking on their door.
Definitely. And I know we have a lot of school community members on this call, and that's really such an easy place to bring the Teal Pumpkin Project. Even if you're not calling it the Teal Pumpkin Project, making it zero cost classroom awards. We have so many different options also listed on the FAIR website. These are just a couple of them that we think are our favorite. Special no homework passes, extra recess, sitting with friends, and then also just choosing to do food-free celebrations. Again, all that sugar, no kids need it. They get enough sugar all throughout the day. So it's so easy for everybody to just take this little bit of extra step to make sure that everybody's being included. And why does it matter? It matters because these kids, they want to be involved. They don't understand why they have food allergies and their friends don't. There's no easy explanation. And it's so easy to do. It's right there in the same Halloween aisle. It's right there. You can print it out on your computer. We want to share with the world that it does matter so much to these children, and that little effort that you put into making things more inclusive, not just for kids with food allergies, but for everybody that has anything that makes them different, is just so important.
And I think that is, we wanted to touch on the Teal Pumpkin Project today because obviously Halloween is coming upon us, and touch on the idea of inclusivity. But I think that a lot of us on this call know that, where this all stems from is a lot of the mental health data that we're seeing within our population in the food allergy community. And we are seeing higher rates of anxiety in different forms: separation anxiety, PTSD, social anxiety. Certainly, we're looking more into the rates of depression within kids with food allergies. And we know that a lot of that comes from the social isolation. So anything that can be done to start to relieve some of that social isolation, I think, is really important as a community, as a home, as a caregiver. And so, even bringing this to schools, as Brett mentioned before, is important so that our kids who may, I know I've shared this before in different forums, like my son has never gone to a birthday party and been able to eat the birthday cake. So that's in and of itself isolating. So any other ways to draw these kids in, or adults in, I think is really important. We do mention, just in talking about inclusivity and allowing kids and adults within the food allergy community to feel like they are a part of things, we mentioned bullying. And I think that it is really important for us to keep honing in on a lot of the mental health data and bullying data. And we know that 1 in 3 kids with food allergies reports being bullied at school. And, I think that as caregivers, teachers, school nurses, really being in tune with that data is important to help these kids overcome that. And just as we look at the types of bullying that happens in the non-food allergic community, we see the same things happening within the food allergic community. So verbal bullying, where a child may be, made fun of because of having a food allergy, and, someone saying something to them about, "Oh, you can't have this food." Social bullying, which a lot of times is situational bullying or exclusion, which we know that happens within the food allergy community all too well. Cyberbullying, we know about, happens outside of the food allergy community, but certainly can happen within the community as well. And physical bullying, I mention within food allergies because that is one that is particularly difficult and dangerous. So obviously, physical bullying would be dangerous for anyone, but in the food allergy community, reported methods of bullying often include using that food allergen as a threat. So either waving it, forcing someone to touch the food, throwing. So those are things that I think as caregivers and school professionals, really understanding that we are on the lookout for this, and making sure that whatever we can do to promote inclusivity, we're doing for not just food allergy kids, but for kids in general. So again, we talked about why it matters, and that was about inclusivity. And now we are going to shift gears a little bit away from Halloween, even though that is what is, 2 weeks, and just reminded me that I did not buy Halloween costumes, but also to talk about inclusivity and safety, because with other holidays outside of Halloween, we are often really looking at how can we make those holidays safe for these kids, and what do we have to do to make them safe? And I think that a lot of us on this call have likely had to have conversations that were really difficult, whether that was with family or with school or another parent, to really think about how can we best convey what is going on with our children. And I recently, and again, that is with every holiday that we have. And so here's where Brett and I will really, this is more of an informal webinar where we will really just kind of talk about the ways that we've navigated and what's out there in the literature to kind of help us form the framework and the baseline data for helping with these conversations and making them easier. So we can start with, this is the 7 fishes. So if this is not a picture of the 7 fishes, but this is the picture that's going to remind me to talk about that. So if anyone, I am from an Italian family, and on Christmas Eve, the tradition is to serve a dinner with 7 fishes. So all different types of fish, shellfish. I'm not a big fish fan, so this was never my favorite meal, but certainly a favorite event. And we always hosted. So my family was always a family that hosted and probably had, all of the aunts, uncles, relatives who came to celebrate with us. Well, lo and behold, when I had my second of 4 kids, Jack, he was allergic to fish and shellfish, among many other things. So this quickly became a holiday where, the whole entire family culture was going to be changed. And that wasn't just a tradition that was going to change for my immediate family, but we needed to have that conversation with our extended family to see how everyone was going to take that conversation. So we'll bounce off of this as we kind of talk through the rest of this session. But I'm going to hand it over to Brett to talk a little bit about some of the things that she similarly dealt with her family.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm from a Jewish family, and as you can see on the Seder plate, there's an egg, and my son is allergic to egg. And when we started celebrating the holiday, when I had kids, we were trying to brainstorm ways to keep him safe. And egg, even though right there it's hard boiled, my family was like, "Oh, he'll be fine. He's just not going to touch it." But if you can envision that study that was done that showed how germs are passed, like imagine like that study that had the glitter, or that demonstration that showed if you wash your hands, the glitter doesn't come off. If you touch this, you can leave a little bit of glitter. Well, that's the same thing with with allergens. So you're leaving trace amounts everywhere you touch. And so really had to convince my family and explain to them that it's not just the egg on the plate that's worrisome. It's also if everybody's touching it and eating it and then not washing their hands immediately. So we were a little bit creative, and we decided, well, an egg looks like a marshmallow. And so we changed it and we added a marshmallow. So just being a little bit of creativity, and the conversation wasn't easy. It's a family tradition. It's a Jewish tradition to have the egg on the Seder plate. And it was a conversation that was uncomfortable, but in the end, we had a solution that worked.
And so today we'll talk about solutions that work easily, and then solutions, what can we do in the situations that maybe it doesn't work as easily. So here is another personal example. Another one of my son's allergens are peanuts. And we would repetitively go to one relative's home where there would always be peanut butter cookies out on the counter for all of the kids, the cousins, and so forth. And despite saying this, every single time that we visited, there would be peanut butter cookies out there. So I bring this up to kind of really start with, how do you handle those situations where you are trying to balance and preserve that relationship, but know that really your goal is to keep your child safe? And these are some of the things that we're going to hope to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so, and share some of the things that we have learned along the way. So one of the things that I have come across from the author that I listed below, this is actually studies that have been done with families of kids with chronic illnesses. And it talks about how do you communicate and what are some of the communication strategies to use. The interesting thing is that I think when we all think as food allergy families about communicating about our children's food allergies, it is sometimes exhaustive and it is sometimes burdensome. And what this author did was actually classify this as communicative labor. And I thought that that was so interesting to actually call it work, and something that not only is difficult, but something that we have to practice at to make that stronger and really commit ourselves to how is the best way to communicate this. And truly effective management of food allergies does require strong communication skills. And I think that in the day-to-day, whether you're a caregiver or a school, that is something that is recognized and something that we are all trying to impart to our kids. Because whether you are an educator in school or you are a parent, I think to have our kids become that advocate who could strongly communicate and give their own needs is what we're all trying to do. But I think that this is one of the hardest parts about being a food allergy caregiver, is that you want to preserve all of your relationships, but you want to make sure that the message is clear. You want to enjoy any celebrations, but safety is the first thing that you want to do. You want to prioritize that being together as a family, celebrating quality time, being together as a school community is really important. But how do you do it safely? How do you communicate your needs safely? And how do you, in the process, not break any, huge family bonds or anything like that? And I know that I answer a lot of the questions that come in for FARE. And these are things that are the real life questions that a lot of times people want to know how to navigate. So one of the papers that I've recently come across is by a PhD psychologist, Jennifer Butte. And she discusses really how to learn how to communicate as a caregiver in the management of food allergies. And what I loved about this article was that it really gave me this list of all of the things that I know that we do, but actually just talked about it in a much more defined way. So we're going to go through some of these and talk about how when you are choosing your words and when you are communicating about food allergies, sometimes how the best way to do that is. And again, Brett and I can tell you that sometimes all of these strategies may work, and then sometimes they won't. And I think that really individualizing that for you and your family's needs are important. So the first thing, and I always, this is something that as a pediatrician and mom, it still bothers me that we have to do this, but legitimizing the severity of the food allergy. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then really using intentional word choices, offering more details when you can or have to, talking about things like allergy versus intolerances, sometimes needing to repeat the message, being very straightforward in that message, and then not being fearful of requesting further information. So the first thing is legitimizing the severity. And oftentimes I think that what other people need to hear is that this is life-threatening. Cross contact matters. Even one small bite is dangerous. And I want to start all of this kind of off with, especially with dealing with our families and talking about food allergies. I think that's really important to note that education is going to be what really drives the change in them understanding. Most of the time where we're running into these problems, it is a lack of education or a lack of awareness that causes this. We obviously all have the same goals as a family or friends to keep that child safe. But I think that sometimes what our family might not recognize is how dangerous this is and how life-threatening this can be. And that's what I think that we have to work off of. I also think about these in terms of if I went to a restaurant, I need to sit down and use that opportunity as a time to increase awareness and increase education. I see Tiffany came back in, which means she may have a question for us.
I just wanted to highlight something that an attendee mentioned in the chat, because we're talking about serving food and recipes and holidays around food, but someone mentioned people wanting to kiss or pinch your child's cheeks or holding them is also a risk, and asking people to make sure to wash their hands becomes tricky. So it's not even just about what food is being served, how it's being made, but it's just the actual, togetherness of being togetherness, and people can become a little, people just don't think about washing their hands before they touch your child's cheek. So I just wanted to make sure we address that too.
Yeah, I think that is really important. And again, I'll go back to, our Christmas Eves in the Seven Fishes. That was actually why when my son was very small, that I probably said, okay, we're hosting, there's not going to be fish and shellfish at this, and it's going to be meat and potatoes, which was a shock for the Italian family of mine. But that kept him safe at that moment in time and allowed the time for awareness and education, that now as he's growing older, I don't necessarily have to use those same tactics, because A, everyone knows to wash their hands before they're interacting with him, but B, he's just at a different developmental stage. Brett, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Grandparents and great grandparents and just people in different generations and different cultures. It's something that having to re-explain every time how a little touch can lead to some big reactions.
Yeah, and I think that's why using very intentional word choices is important. Saying things like life-threatening or anaphylaxis. I really have started, probably 10 years ago, using the line, he will anaphylax or have a life-threatening reaction if he comes in contact with any bit of this, even if it is from, oil that was used to fry a chicken cutlet that had egg on it, and his French fry touches that, he will anaphylax and have a reaction. I also think it's important to offer more details, and that's what this article by Dr. Butte also talked about, which is giving people even more information. So some of the ones that I look at, and again, I think it is all of our families want to keep our kids safe. So in thinking about where are we going wrong, a lot of times it's just they never knew anyone that had a food allergy. I know that in our family, and even myself, when I was in elementary school, dating back to that, I didn't have any friends in my classroom that had a food allergy, but now there are almost 2 kids in every classroom across the country that have a food allergy. So because the incidence is rising, we are living in a different environment. I also think it's important that we, ask where there is a need for more education. So some people might not know what is a tree nut. Brett and I have discussed, both of our kids have egg allergies. Oftentimes, even with egg, people will say to us things like, oh, well, there is cheese on that. And kind of knowing the difference between dairy and egg, we may need to be telling family members and friends about those types of details. And hopefully, if anyone wants to share in the chat, but what I why I think this is so important that we do all of this teaching and awareness. I would love to know, has anyone else been called the overprotective parent, right? So this is a picture of a child just sitting on a swing who's got all of the protective gear, helmets, knee pads, actually bubble wrapped. And I think that initially when I was addressing food allergies, it was as if I was being overprotective to some people in our family or friend circle. And it wasn't until everyone started to understand how severe and life-threatening these reactions were, that they understood that this wasn't a matter of being overprotective. This was a matter of the level of protection that my child required because food was everywhere. So this was something that was hard for me to overcome, but I certainly think that by learning how to, and sometimes learning through trial and error, how to communicate these things, it helped for everyone involved. I also think that some education needs to include things like food allergy versus food intolerance. I'm sure that many people here have often, if anyone especially deals with any sort of dairy allergy, a lot of times if you are talking about a dairy allergy, someone else will say, oh, I know because I get a stomach ache from milk as well. Well, really explaining to people that there is a difference between a food allergy and a food intolerance. And a food allergy is an immune response that our body has that is life-threatening or potentially life-threatening, and that reaction can occur in minutes to hours. And a food intolerance often involves just the digestive system and not the immune system, and is not life-threatening. It is uncomfortable and it is a problem, but it is not life-threatening. So I think teasing that out with people who might not know will actually improve our ability to communicate and then get our child in a more safe environment. Tiffany?
I was on mute. I was just popping in. I didn't get in fast enough before you started this slide, but just wanted to share that there is so much solidarity in the chat, and that people have been experiencing a lot of the similar things. I've been bullied. Essentially, people think that I'm crazy. They think I'm crazy because my daughter's under two, she can't communicate. I was called being over dramatic. I'm being called extra. And so just referring back to this previous slide where the child on the swing had, the helmet and then the pads and all the protective gear, it sounds like a lot of the parents that are in here have had a very similar reaction from others in their groups.
And that's why I think communication is so important. I think that we are communicating our child's needs. And you are right, especially when you have a younger child, you are the voice of that child. You are the one advocating for your child. And everything that you're doing as that child is younger is teaching your child as they become their older selves to advocate for themselves. And that's actually my proudest moments of my 12-year-old will be when I hear him say to someone, oh, actually, is that safe? I have a food allergy. Or can I see that box? I have a food allergy. And that's when I know I've done my job. And those are the things that he has seen for the past 12 years. And I hope that he carries that with him, even though I know he will likely, slip up in his risk taking. We talk about in terms of our communication, and especially with food allergies, in even repeating the message and not assuming that because you've had the conversation once, that person is going to remember. So again, share in the chat if you feel like this has happened. Brett, I know that, you and I have spoken about this in the past as well.
Yeah. One tip that I always give to newly diagnosed families is along the same lines of the straightforward and direct. So before this was again trial and error, I used to just write on, when I was placing an order online, I would just write egg and nut allergy. But what I found was that sometimes they would stop and they would think that I was asking for egg or nuts to be put on the item. So now I change it and I write alert, : egg and nut allergy. So that's just something that people, they saw the egg and nut. I can't even tell you how many times that happened where it would arrive and it would have eggs or nuts added to it, thinking that was like what I was asking. So straightforward, direct. And I saw some comments about people getting offended about bringing the food. It's such a fine line, because you want to be respectful of being invited to places, but the priority is safety. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people who don't get it misunderstand is the whole cross contact. It took me a lot of times explaining to my family, no, my son can't eat your jelly, even if it's safe, because I don't know if you put peanut butter in the on the knife and then dipped it into the jelly. We don't use pans that have also cooked items with egg, because I don't know how well you cleaned afterwards. So these are all very difficult, uncomfortable conversations, but it's our job as the caregiver to show our children how it's done so that they can do it as adults.
And I agree. I love the word that you used for the chat, that whoever said that you're worried about offending or people feel offended, because, I remember really thinking, and I still have this, I'm afraid to offend someone if I say, oh, he can't eat that because there may be some remnants left in your pan, because that assumes that they didn't clean their pots and pans well enough, but it's a risk we don't take. So what I now say in those situations is, actually, we just don't eat, out of something that has had his allergen in it. And as far as bringing food places, I will often give people the heads up that we're going to do that. Or I, will call and kind of see what is going to be safe, or what do we personally as a family feel comfortable eating there. And I really don't waver, because I know that he is watching and using me as that, trying to navigate what is safe. And I want him to understand the real parameters of what is safe, and what are we doing that is understanding the realistic risk that's there, and then making a decision based off of that. But as Brett said, really being straightforward and direct. I have had to repeat to multiple people in our house, not my specific house, but our extended family, he always needs to have his epinephrine with him. So if you are taking him to the park, he needs to have his epinephrine auto injector with him. And if someone says, well, we're just going to be down the block, well, he needs to have his epinephrine auto injector next to him. He cannot eat peanuts. Well, how do you know? I know he cannot eat peanuts. He will not be eating peanuts. So just really reiterating the things that will keep your child safe, and being able to be strong in doing that, because again, those little eyes are watching, and we are, really modeling the behavior that they will have at some point. And then really even understanding, the concept of cross contact. So we know cross contact to be that anything that is touching an allergen that can transfer that allergen. Well, really reiterating that to family, that no food can touch, if it's a dairy allergy, anything with dairy. No food can touch anything with mayonnaise, right? For us with eggs, that was a big issue, that we would see that it would pop up into dressings or stuff like that. So really just being specific, and then not being afraid or ashamed of asking more information. So can I see the label for that? Where is the recipe for that? How did you cook that? And I even, I asked that of my own parent if she is cooking. And again, knowing that everyone's goal is the same, and everyone wants to keep my child safe. I know that sometimes that's a difficult conversation to have, because obviously she's making that with love. But if I don't ask the questions, I feel like I'm not doing my due diligence there. So again, we looked at all of these things about, how can we legitimize the severity to make sure that we are letting people know that this is life-threatening. Small bites will matter, and this could end up in anaphylaxis, using very intentional words. offering more detail, describing things that we think people might have questions with, and soliciting questions. I think sometimes when family members find out about food allergies, if they're not as familiar, soliciting the questions and coming up with a plan as a family, I think that that's important too. Not being afraid to repeat the message, having very straightforward or direct messaging, and then really asking the questions that you need to ask to keep your child safe. And I think as we end, we wanted to kind of just give a couple of tips for a safe Halloween, and then we'll take questions. But this is just because, we talked about the Teal Pumpkin Project. Now, how do we keep our kids safe on the trail? One of the things that we always say is no eating while treating. So, I know my son comes home. Some of, my other 3 kids may come home with half-eaten buckets. My son comes home with all of his candy in there. We read every single label every time because they really may change. And we also, really caution people that you may be able to eat the regular size version of a candy, but especially when you're looking at some of these holiday mini versions, make sure that you are reading the labeling because sometimes the labeling changes. I know, Brett, you had a circumstance like that with your son when he was younger.
Yeah, we did. One of his safe items was Laffy Taffy, which is a very common small sized trick or treat size candy. So we looked, it was safe. It was great. He loved it. It was wonderful. Then we went to a rest stop. We were on Route 95, taking a long drive, and he picked that out from the gas station. That was going to be his treat. I didn't do what a caregiver is supposed to do and read the label every time. I assumed he's had it before many times. It should be safe. Well, it turns out that Laffy Taffy, the larger size, does have egg as an ingredient. So every label, every time. I know Hershey, who is usually really good about labeling, some of their larger size bars are different than the smaller size bars about the may contain or made on facility with nuts. So every time, it's what FARE teaches us right away when we're newly diagnosed. Read every label every time. In my house, I read it at the supermarket. I read it when I'm pulling it out of the bags and putting it in my pantry, and then I read it once again when I'm about to make the food. So we read it 3 times in my house.
And I will just add also here that sometimes when foods are prepared in the States or manufactured in the States, they may have different allergens than when they're manufactured abroad. And it may be the same name brand, but it may be manufactured across, different countries, and the allergens may be different, or the advisory labeling may be different too. So even if it's the same size, if it's made in a different country, it may be different. So I just wanted to point that out there too.
Yes, definitely. So really reading the labels every time, especially, when you are going through that treat basket. Bringing your epinephrine auto injector, that is a, non-starter in our house, and making sure that as he's out on the trail, he has his epinephrine with him. This is something that we do in our house, but it is actually lended for a really wonderful tradition that my son looks forward to even now as a 12-year-old, and that's to trade in any of his unsafe candy. We call it the Switch Witch here, but I've heard it go by many names. And so I will often go and buy treats that I know are safe for him. Sometimes I'll even put in certainly some non-food things that I know, I could barter with and say, I'll give you this for 3 of those. But we do a great trade, and that for him is probably one of the highlights of his Halloween night, is to walk away. It's almost like trick-or-treating a second time. Also, if it doesn't have a label, don't eat it. I always tell my son that as he's out on the trail, because there are things that maybe he safely eats at home because I'm making them at home. So if it doesn't have a label, don't eat it. And use this as an opportunity to teach label reading. As we've all been saying, when you're coming back, if your child is like, is this safe for me? Say, let's see, let's look at it together and see. And just because these kids are just that, and kids who just happen to have food allergies, as a pediatric ER doc, I feel like I have to say, always remind them to cross the street safely and look both ways. Have something that lights up, especially if it's gotten dark, and let them have fun. So Halloween is meant to be that. But thank you for this time, and we'll open it up to questions.
Just a few questions and comments that came in. Someone asked, do you think it's okay to let your allergic child take the unsafe candy, or should we just decline it at the door?
So we've done both. And I will tell you that if there is and again, I think that this is a decision that every family needs to make for themselves, and depending on what their child's threshold is. My son is very, very, he's anaphylactic to peanuts. So if someone's offering him a peanut candy, we do refuse that candy. If there's something that I know that has a small bit of egg in it, if he puts that in his basket, we take it when we come home. So for us, it's a matter of kind of knowing what foods he's most allergic to. But I think that you can do it either way. Either have them say thank you but no thank you, or trade it when you get back. Brett, what do you do, or did you do?
For my son, it was kind of interesting because he went through stages where he was really shy about his food allergies. And then he went through a stage where he wanted everybody to know. And then it kind of calmed down again and he was a little bit more shy. So I think that was kind of like we saw the curve. He when he was younger, he would just take everything and we would just wash his hands. And we felt okay with that. He would take everything and then we would get rid of it right away before we got into the house. But then he went door to door and would say, no, I'm allergic. So I love that part of trick-or-treating, but then that stopped. So I think it just also depends on the kid's age and their personality a little bit too.
Yeah. I love the rhyme that Julie put in here. If the ingredients aren't readable, then the food isn't eatable. That's fantastic, especially for the little guys.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to say, since we're on the Halloween trick-or-treating topic, because I do know that in the chat we have some I saw we had a Girl Scout leader in here, someone who may not be managing food allergies for their individual child, but that may just be part of the community. If you are going to participate in the Teal Pumpkin Project, just making sure that the non-food treats are in a separate bowl. And that goes for those that are participating, if you're having that at your house, but also when your kiddos are going to someone's house, if the non-food treats are in the bowl with other candies, then that's probably unsafe because you just don't know. We've talked about cross contact many times. I know a lot of parents on this and caregivers on this call probably already know that, but just wanted to remind them that even if it is a non-food treat, if it's in the same bowl, then there could be cross contact and then it's unsafe. So if you are offering these non-food treats, I have my Teal Pumpkin behind me. I offer, spider rings, glow sticks, stickers, stencils, all that kind of fun stuff in that bucket, and then candy in a separate bucket.
So that's what we do too, 100%. I have mine in like a teal treasure chest now that I try to hide year to year because my kids try to, pillage what's in there at the end of Halloween, but I put it away and stock it up with new things.
Yeah. Someone in the beginning of the chat, and I have to go all the way back, and we've had a lot of a big conversation today, which is great. Mentioned that they're seeing teal pumpkins or different colored pumpkins be more trendy. And so when you see that on someone's doorstep, we just want to make sure that, is this a teal pumpkin for non-food treats, or is this a teal pumpkin just because it looks really beautiful and it's like part of this neighbor's decor? So asking questions from beginning to end, what do you have at your house? Being open. You are talked a lot about communication, so just making sure that sometimes the pumpkins just can be really, really pretty and happen to be teal, but other times we hope that they are offering the non-food treats. So I wanted to mention that. This was answered already. If safe candy wrapped in the same bowl, is safe candy? If the candy is wrapped, someone's asking this. If the candy is wrapped, there could still be cross contact, even just because of how it was made, how it was packaged. You just don't know. So I would just keep everything separate. Sorry, that question was confusing for me. Someone asked, and this is getting back to, outside of Halloween, some other holidays. Is it unreasonable to ask your hosts, like grandparents, for example, to adjust the menu so that my child can eat what everyone else is eating?
So I think that that's a wonderful question. I think one that we probably all struggle with in asking for the menu to be entirely changed. And I think that that's going to depend on who the host is and how close you are and your relationship in doing that. I know that for myself, and as my son was younger, I did, if it were grandparents, I asked for him to be included. And as we spoke about before, that was more from a safety perspective, that I didn't want the other cousins eating it and having it on their hands. And then for cross contact, I offered to help in doing that. I would always say, I'm happy to bring any or all of the meal if that's easier. I offered to host if I needed to. But I definitely think that would be an individual decision and based on the comfort level that you have with the host, whose house you're going to. What do you guys think, Brett, Tiffany?
Yeah, I think that is the right answer. So my mom could not love my son more and could not be more well-meaning. She was so excited. She came and visited and said, I found safe eggs. I found safe cupcakes for Ben. And I'm thinking, wow, like there's a brand that I don't know about. Wow, this is huge. On the label, it said cage-free eggs. So it was, the way that the eggs were raised were cage-free chickens. But again, she meant so well. So I have never, even in 17 years, felt comfortable with anybody but besides myself cooking for my child. We go to very few restaurants. I'm not saying that that's the best scenario because it's just a matter of risk. And I know that everybody in my family means well. I just have not felt comfortable that they know enough about food allergies to keep them entirely safe.
Yeah, I think that asking others in your family to adjust the menu is one way, but again, you would have to be trusting your family members to do everything the way that you're doing it. You're using the safe pan, you're using the safe brands, you're using the safe, you've thought so much into this process, and it's something that they're not used to doing, and it's not their fault. It just, it's just things that you've had to think about and plan for and make decisions around isn't something that they've had to do. And so to ask them to do that for one day a year, it can be a lot. And there's a lot of trust there.
Now I do actually encourage that they change the menu so it's not something that contains the ingredient. For instance, the peanut butter cookies, I would definitely ask my family, make it like a shortbread cookie or oatmeal raisin, something that doesn't have peanuts because of the cross-contamination. I just still would not let my child eat it. But definitely I have no problem saying, please change the menu away from things that contain the item.
Yeah, I think there are so many recipes where like nuts are added as an add-on in like in a stuffing, or there's like an egg wash on a bread, where there's ways to prepare things without that item. And even if it may not be necessarily safe for your child to eat it because you don't know how it was totally prepared or what brands were used or ingredients were used, at least there won't be, walnuts or pecans on the plate next to them because they were able to keep it out of the stuffing. Yeah. Well, this has been great. I've been sharing a lot about the Teal Pumpkin Project, and I know we did share a lot with our attendees today. We have a ton of resources on our website at foodallergy.org for not only Halloween, but other holidays that are coming up, from Thanksgiving to Hanukkah and Christmas. And, I can't believe we're almost in the new year already. It's wild. So I encourage you to check those out. I did share the evaluation link in the chat. Please provide us with some feedback, and I really hope to see you guys at the November webinar. So thank you all for joining, and happy Halloween.
Yes, thank you all for coming. And, again, I think people are well-intentioned and want to do really great things by our kids and those with food allergies, but sometimes that comes with just really knowing the tools and the ways to communicate and how to educate and increase awareness. So thank you for coming, and, turn it teal.
Turn it teal. Thank you all.